Imagine a new kind of investing, a potentially life-changing way to invest that honors biblical principles, the kind of principles that you and I grew up with. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has made biblically responsible investing possible, offering mutual funds and ETFs that are filtered for biblical principles. Don't compromise your values. Invest with Timothy Plan. Ask your financial advisor or call Timothy Plan at 1-800-TIM-PLAN. Again, that's 1-800-846-7526 and discover what it means to be a biblically responsible investor. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing. Mutual funds distributed by Timothy Partners Ltd. and ETFs distributed by Foreside Fund Services LLC. As a paid testimonial, there is no guarantee of future performance and each experience will differ. Well, hey there, welcome to another MemoPod. I am your host, Peter Heck. It is great to have you aboard with us. A lot of things that we need to get to first and foremost as we are heading into the Memorial Day weekend. You all need to be reminded that our May special for signups, so if you are a free subscriber, your ability to get to become part of this community for the next year at a discounted rate of 30% off, it ends at the end of the month of May. Then it's back to the normal the normal subscription rate. You can tell this is going to be a dynamite episode of the MemoPod. But anyway, so make sure you take advantage of that. There's a link in the email that you received that has this MemoPod in it. There's a link there. You can click on it. All new subscriptions. You've got 30% off. We'd love to have you join us, especially heading into an election year where we're going to be pulled in a lot of ungodly directions. We want to stay with our eyes focused on Jesus, properly ordered loves, all of that stuff that we've talked about. Okay. So that's first and foremost. Second thing, some of you who have been, I don't even like to use the phrase with me, but you have known about me, you followed some of the stuff that I've done for a long period of time, you have been laughing with me at the situation involving the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, Harrison Butker. For those of you who are not, like you've come into the world where you realize Peter Heck is a person in the last 8-9 years, if that's you, then I'm going to be cluing you in on something that you didn't know about me. And that is, first of all, most of you do know, if you've been following for any length of time, that I do teach at a high school. And it was a great privilege to be asked on a number of occasions to do the commencement speech for the graduating seniors. It got to the point where I would agree to do it every couple years. That, and I think one of the reasons that students asked was just because I tried to remember funny things about their class and make it enjoyable and focus on them. So in 2013, you want to talk about how cutting edge this guy is. I gave the Harrison Butker speech before it was cool. And in actuality, it wasn't the Harrison Butker speech. I didn't get nearly as political as Harrison Butker. I'm going to actually read to you from the transcript because it's funny, the deal that was made of that compared to what Harrison Butker said is just, it's funny to see the difference. But what also has been humorous is it became such a deal. And if you want to know what I mean by such a deal, the Today Show called. The Today Show called my school corporation about interviewing me and the superintendent about my graduation speech. That's how big a deal this became. Okay, so this is 2013. And I don't really talk about this, but it is so close in relationship to what's going on with Harrison Butker's speech that I wrote about it, not the Bee, this last week. The Chiefs kicker that basically espoused Christian views at a supposedly Christian university, and then it became a huge deal. And everybody said, oh, you got to be fired. Okay, so let me start with my own situation. In 2013, I give this speech, and one of the things that I'm trying to do, after I get through a lot of memories that I had with the class, I'm trying to impress upon them how they can actually, like, young people like to rebel. that goes along with youthfulness, is rebellion. And so my point was, a lot of you are going to go off to college, and you're going to be told that you can rebel against your upbringing and do all of this stuff. But in actuality, people that do that walk away from the values of their upbringing, the more conservative values of their upbringing, they're not rebels, they're conformists. When you go to a college campus and you get sucked into what 99% of everybody else does, that doesn't make you a rebel. That makes you a conformist. That you are actually too weak to uphold your convictions and stick by your convictions in the face of all of the mockery and everything else that you're going to take for being a stick in the mud, and you don't have any fun and all that stuff that you're going to hear on a college campus. You are the rebel if you stick to, say, biblical principles. Now, I didn't mention biblical principles. Well, I mentioned biblical principles, but I didn't call them biblical principles. There were two big mistakes that I made in this speech, and giving it was not one of them. Two big mistakes that I made in this speech. Number one, I turned to the ladies and I turned to the gentlemen, and I addressed them separately. Probably should have kept it all as one, in hindsight. Should have kept it all as one, instead of delineating between the two. Or, if not that, then at least make the guys go first. The fact that I addressed females first, ladies first, and there was no reason that I did, alphabetical order, I guess, I don't know. The reason that I addressed the females first, I don't know, but I did. And so then the people that got huffy about it, they didn't even hear what I said to the dudes. So maybe if I'd have reversed it. Or, I'll tell you the second thing, the second big mistake I made. But this is, I've pulled up the speech here because I kept it. This is what I said in 2013. This is the speech manuscript. Okay? I first turned to the girls and I said, ladies, I challenge you to live a life of rebellion. To recognize that your body is a temple that is deserving of honor, not indiscretion. I challenge you to be women of virtue, finding beauty not in how many unprincipled men you can attract, but finding beauty in self-respect. I challenge you to devote yourself to family and to your children. Now listen, if you choose to have a career, God's blessings upon you. But I still challenge you to recognize what the world scoffs at, that the greatest role of your life will be that of wife and mother. That the greatest impact that you can, could, or will ever contribute to our world is the loving and devoted investment into the nurturing, raising, and care of your precious children. And then here's the line. To solve the problems of our society, and by the way, I'm stepping away from the speech for a second. This is something that as a teacher, I certainly am aware of, because I see all of these kids that come from broken homes. They come from home situations where mom and dad are not invested in their lives. If anybody knows the value of a nuclear family, a strong family, it is someone who is teaching in the public school system. Now, they may not admit it for one reason or another, but they know it to be the case. That the clearest, most obvious formula for having a well-adjusted, well-behaved child is a kid that comes from a strong nuclear family. That's just the reality. And notice I'm not saying churched or unchurched, because at the high school level, I haven't noticed a huge difference as far as how that works out. I'm not saying that I don't think it's important your kids are churched. I'm saying at this level, being a behaved, well-adjusted kid is largely about having a stable home environment, because they haven't gone out and made their own values and all of those things yet. So anyway, as a teacher, I know how important family is. A lot of people go out and have careers, invest in family. But here was the line. To solve the problems of our society, we don't need more women CEOs. What we need is more women as invested wives and mothers. Then I turned to the gentlemen and I said, men, I challenge you to live a life of rebellion. To recognize that manliness is not defined by who bench presses the most or who scores with the most women. I challenge you to recognize that the measure of a man is found in his character, how well he can control his urges, his temptations, his desires, setting them aside for the good of others. I challenge you, men, to find a woman to love, to commit yourself to her and her alone for the rest of your life. I challenge you to be man enough that when a provocatively dressed woman comes on the television, turn the channel. Send the message to your wife that she alone captivates you and she is in competition with no one. You want to be a rebel? That's a rebel. I challenge you to lead your homes in the pathway of righteousness, provide moral clarity to your children, and unyielding hard work for your wife. Notice, by the way, how much more I'm directing at men. Didn't matter. So many times, I skipped ahead. To solve the problems of our society, we don't need more millionaire men entrepreneurs. We need more men acting as fierce defenders of their wives and providers for their children. So I go on and I finish the speech. And there's a reason I'm telling you this, and it's not to pat myself on the back. As soon as I got done, standing ovation. There wasn't a person in the gymnasium that wasn't standing up. Now, are there people out there that probably didn't care, didn't listen? Yeah. But they stood because everybody else was standing. Okay. By that afternoon, I had a speech to give in another location that evening. By that afternoon, I'm catching wind that RTV6, which in Indianapolis, that's the ABC affiliate, was in town. They'd received a tip from someone who was at the speech that heard me say, we don't need women CEOs. By the next day, there were headlines on Yahoo News, Bloomberg, Yahoo News, Huffington Post. Huffington Post even, well, we'll get to that in a second. But they all were running this headline, The Daily Caller. That's Tucker Carlson's news organization that he started. The Daily Caller had as one of their lead stories. This was the headline, commencement speaker, we don't need more women CEOs. And it had a stock image photo of a mom dressed up in her kitchen with the daughter down in front of her as she's teaching her to cook. Black and white. I contacted Daily Caller because I was doing a radio show at the time, and I said, you do know that I use you guys all the time as a good source of information. I find you to be credible. You are cutting through the bull that's out there. You didn't even contact me before running this story. And the author of the story responded and said, well, I thought I might hear from you. Really? Then why didn't you contact me to begin with? So I demanded a retraction, never received it. Since have had no use for the Daily Caller whatsoever. They've probably changed leadership since then, but I just washed my hands of it. That's the same kind of yellow journalism. It's the same kind of sensationalist headlines, all of that stuff that we get so mad at ABC and NBC and the Washington Post and MSNBC, which, by the way, all of them were running with the story as well. It was fascinating to me that nobody mentioned how I had said to women, if you want to have a career, God's blessings upon you. That earlier in the speech, I'd singled out a couple girls and said they were going to go on to do great things, that they were brilliant minds. But here I am, understanding the value of a nuclear family, saying to women, you want to make a big impact. Nobody's going to remember if you were a CEO. Guys, if you want to make a big impact, nobody's going to care that you were a millionaire entrepreneur. What's going to last is the investment you made in your children and the way that you raised them, the way you cared about your family. That's how you make the difference. That's the point of the speech. But all of the headlines, we don't need more women CEOs. The Today Show calls and wants to do an interview. My superintendent was willing. I said, I'm not going to do it. I'd actually learned that from Rush Limbaugh, who said, you never go onto their turf. The only way you do it, and this is what I told my superintendent, the only way I will do it is if it is a live interview, meaning it is airing as they're recording it. No editing takes place, which I'm sure NBC, the Today Show, would not have agreed to. But anyway, that summer was the worst summer of my life. that there were emails coming in from people that, of course, hadn't been at the speech, didn't know anything about it, demanding that I be fired. How can this person be allowed to teach at the school? Even today, there are kids that go through Eastern that think that I don't give graduation speeches anymore was because the school told me I couldn't after I had done that. And I think that there are still teachers at the school where I teach that still talk about, well, at one time where he insulted the women, the girls, and told them not to be CEOs. And they know better if they were there. It's frustrating, to say the least. But there was a valedictorian that year from a neighboring school that decided to launch her career by writing an op-ed for the Huffington Post saying how she gave a speech, and it was totally opposite. Hers was all about breaking down the patriarchy, and mine was about securing the patriarchy. Actually, no, it wasn't. It was about the value of having a mom and a dad that are invested. By the way, the really funny thing about that, I found out from some of her classmates who didn't have a lot of use for her, that her mom had left her, I think she was a lawyer or something, her job to go home and raise this young woman. Kind of my point, that an invested mom and dad make a difference in the success of their children. But again, just humorous to me that all of the focus was onto what he said to women. But it was a very narrow focus on one line without the context. So yes, I had thoughts when I saw the Harrison Butker situation. Which my thoughts when I wrote for Not the Bee pretty much circled around, okay, help me to understand here what is outrageous about this and what deserves a change.org petition to have this guy booted from the Kansas City Chiefs. It doesn't make any sense because he is a Christian, he's Catholic, but he's a Christian who goes to a Christian school, it's a Catholic school, and he gives a speech where what he espouses is what Christians have believed and said for 2,000 years. But yet now, all of a sudden, it's insanely controversial. And that, to me, is the takeaway from all of this. That generates outrage. It's what I said in 2013. I can't believe that somebody, I mean, I can, but I can't, that somebody was outraged by the idea that we would tell young women and young men, recognize that the most important thing you will do is love your family. That has to be a top priority for the future of our civilization. That anybody could find that outrageous, that anybody could find that controversial, you're kind of tipping your hand. That you're a malcontent, an activist, somebody who's looking to be offended, that wants to have a cause, that wants to be able to raise a stink about something. Because any teacher knows that to be the case. Any rational human being knows that to be the case. So do I feel for Harrison Butker? I don't know. Better him than me, right? Now, I dealt with it 10 years earlier than he did. I was walking down the hallway of my school. One of my fellow teachers who was employed at the time, and I didn't make the connection. When he asked me this, he said, "Hey, are you doing speechwriting?" And I said, "You mean for myself?" Or he said, "No, like for other people. Do you do speechwriting?" So my initial thought was he has a speech to give and he's wanting some help. I said, "Well, not professionally, but I mean, I can help out if you need help or offer tips or whatever." And he said, so you didn't write Harrison Butker's speech?" Yeah. Funny stuff. Funny stuff, people. But no, my whole take, as I was saying on Not the Bee, was I can't believe this is controversial and that people would think he doesn't have a right to express his opinion. What is that? That a Christian would express Christian views at a Christian university and we're saying that should cost him his job? Don't ever talk to me about your commitment to civil liberties and your commitment to free speech and the free exchange of ideas if you're that intolerant of somebody else's ability to speak. I had somebody comment on my article on my Facebook page, where I'd linked the column, and said, yes, I'm intolerant of him. I'm intolerant of this guy because he's a misogynist, and that should cost him. Okay, and so I asked back, and I never got a response. Because you believe this person is a misogynist. They meet the definition that you've created for misogyny. Because you believe that, then that person shouldn't have the right to speak? Shouldn't have the right to share their opinions? That's what you're saying? You're a fascist, if that's what you think. And maybe we've all come to believe that, well, fascism only happens with the conservatives that want women in red suits or whatever with the white bonnets. You know, that, whatever that show's called. All I can think of is The Conjuring, and that's not it. I can picture it, I just can't think. A Wives' Tale, that's what it is. Yeah, The Conjuring, it's all the same. But we've been told all along, well, fascism's on the right. No, if you believe that a person shouldn't have a right to speak an opinion that you disagree with, as many on the left apparently do, you're fascists. That's the word for it. And that isn't a good place to be. Don't be afraid of other ideas. If you think what Butker said was wrong, then tell us why you think he was wrong. I don't know why this is hard. I don't know why we've lost sight of that, but that's the whole point there. And again, I even think that for Butker's speech more than my own. One of the reasons that I went very generic and I didn't, expound upon biblical doctrine or get political, one of the reasons that I didn't do that was because it was a public school. Because I didn't think it was the appropriate forum to do so. But Butker's at a private university and sharing his opinions as a private citizen, not employed by the government. He's employed by the Kansas City Chiefs. But again, there's another thing. Shouldn't be allowed to do it. Did you see a paper in Kansas City actually made this suggestion? I got to find this. The Kansas City Star publishes an essay demanding that the Chiefs kick their 3-time Super Bowl winning kicker to the curb, one of the best of his generation, and replace him with a woman. Boy, that would be the height, the pinnacle of the outrage mob success, would it not? The pinnacle. You've seen some of the women kickers that have kicked in college, that for the sake of political correctness that they put out onto the field, even though they haven't earned the position. But they put them out there anyway, and the kickoff goes 15, 20 yards along the ground. So the Super Bowl champion team firing, getting rid of one of the best kickers of his generation, all because he has an opinion that a bunch of folks on the left don't like. Which, again, is just Orthodox Christian views. Astounding that we're at that point. So those are my thoughts. That was my speech. Interested in your thoughts, peter@peterheck.com. That is peter@peterheck.com. Man, it's made me relive the glory days. The worst summer of my life. Hands down. Just waking up every day with the pit in my stomach of the headache that I had caused for the school, and that the entire graduation thing then became about me, which was never the intent. Yikes. Oh, did I ever say what my second mistake was? I should have reversed it. I should have said we don't need more men CEOs and we don't need more millionaire women entrepreneurs. It wouldn't have made as catchier of a headline. We don't need women CEOs. I could have stripped them of that, and then I don't know that it would have been a big deal. It probably would have been. Because people don't like reality, because that's what it is. Your thoughts, welcome. peter@peterheck.com. That's peter@peterheck.com. In the second half of this, we got to talk Pope. Jorge Bergoglio. That is the man's name, the fallible, sinful man who goes by the title of Pope. He gave an interview. I'm going to play the interview for you, at least a portion of it. And we got to respond to this. I put it in a column this week, and I try not to do the same thing on the pod, the memo pod, that I did in a column, but this is kind of important stuff. It needs to be addressed. So we're going to do that, and then I got an email. We're going to start doing this in the memo pod, the second half. Those of you who are paid subscribers, you have thoughts, you have questions, I need to respond to those. So you can start sending them my way. I'll fit them in on Friday. Just the ones that I've accumulated through the week, I'll fit them in on Friday. And the one that I want to hit this week, I think is maybe going to surprise you. It has to do with what I think is going to happen in this upcoming election. So that, Pope, Bergoglio, all of that. If you're a paid subscriber, I'll see you after the break. If you're a free subscriber, I got to leave you here until you get into the email, take the 30% off, make the payment, and join our community. And then I'll see you in a second, along with all of the other paid subscribers. Hang tight.
The Memo with Peter Heck.
Please patronize and thank all the sponsors of the Heck podcast, including McGonigal's Buick GMC, Terrell's Auto Service, Norris Insurance, Stevens Machine, Creative Financial Center, Indiana Right to Life, Tri-Green Tractor, the Indiana Family Institute, Hartman Family Farms, Liberty Financial Group, the Wyman Group, and J. Watson Creations.